Hello everybody and welcome along. Today we're looking at the Theatre Deluxe in Norwich, Norfolk in the UK, once to be found in St Andrew's Street in Norwich. The cinema, known as the TDL or the Ranch House because of all the westerns it screened, was the first picture palace in the city, opening on the 9th of April 1910 with Corsican's Revenge starring Marcel Barry and generous rivals. It was operated by the Electric Theatre's 1908 Limited chain. It seated 700 people and of course was a solo screen cinema, but the story really starts long before that time. In the early 1830s, the building first opened its doors to the public as the Royal Bazaar, the foundation stone being laid on September the 8th, 1831, the coronation day of William IV. It went on to become the lecture hall, which presented the first moving picture shows, Pool's diorama, with sound effects. They were pictures of faraway places flickering on a screen, with a chap at the back banging on a drum and blowing a bugle. Then there were the more outrageous shows, starring the likes of Captain Bates, who was said to weigh 34 stones, and a Chinese giant called Chang, who stood 9 feet tall, and a massive Tyrolean giantess who weighed 360 pounds. She was so popular she returned to appear at the much bigger Hippodrome in Norwich later on. Come 1872, the lecture hall had moved up market. It became the Victoria Hall and a venue for classical music, attracting big names and companies. Now, this man appeared there. He was a Russian-born violinist, hailed by Tchaikovsky, and whose name I don't want to even try to pronounce. But by 1910, the Victoria Hall had become the Theatre Deluxe, and the people queued to watch the modern miracle of moving pictures. This was the first building in the city designed for films, where the later manager was Archie Gibbs, a gifted musician who joined the cinema business in the orchestra pit for silent films. Norwich people loved the old TDL, Theatre Deluxe, and in 1920 it was rebuilt again to increase the number of seats to 1,000, and it boasted a tea room as well. During the glory days of cinema, most of them, in the city at least, had commissionaires in smart uniforms, sometimes ex-military men who looked the part and kept an eye on everyone, making sure everything was tickety-boo and that people behaved themselves. At the Ranch House it was Jock, a real character, and among those who remembered him with great affection was David Tye of Norwich. He said, "The man in the uniform was Jock. He kept order over us in those days. We were all young and because of the war we weren't big lads like the youth of today," David said. The Theatre Deluxe was a place which always gave value for money. It was never a posh picture house, but it had loyal and faithful customers. It was the last cinema in Norwich to be converted to talking pictures in 1931, but the first to screen 3D films in 1953. But times were changing. The TDL was running out of customers, and it closed in 1957. A fall in attendances coupled with its failure to meet safety standards resulted in its closure in the February of that year. On the final night, the hooligans in the audience went berserk, tearing the dear old place apart, damaging seats, ripping down the screen and reeling out fire hoses. It was heartbreaking for the manager, Archie Gibbs. Now the theatre was left to rot for many years, eventually being bought by the Borough Council and demolished. What was once a theatre of delights became a yard for the telephone exchange. It was the end of an era during which the old Theatre Deluxe in St Andrew's Street entertained and informed the people. Comments in an article online include, "We used to queue up outside if the cinema was full and wait for people to come out. Then Jock would shout out how many seats they had. Sometimes we could stand inside by the aisle, and when someone got up, you could ask them if they were leaving and then rush to get the seat." For the boys, the heroes of the day included Superman and Flash Gordon. Most Saturdays, Norwich would be full of young lads running around, acting out the adventures they had seen. One person commented, I went there in the 50s and they showed a 3D film and we were handed a pair of cardboard glasses. The picture looked like it was coming right out at you. I loved the dear old ranch house. Heather Copeman of Norwich described the TDL as being in a class of its own. She said, we love the old cowboy films and you could have a cup of tea for tuppence in the interval. There will never be another place like it. Well, that's about it for this one. I really hope that you liked it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, particularly subscribe because that helps a lot. Next up is the Regal in Walton-on-the-Naze in Essex. And then after that, we're looking at the Ritz in Cleethorpes. Until then, be good to each other and I'll see you soon. Ta-da.